I still can't believe how quickly things spiraled over a simple Wi-Fi password. One moment I'm changing my own router settings, the next, the police are at my door. Thanks to Karen, our so-called HOA president, who believed she had the right to my internet. She barged onto my porch, demanded the new password, then called the cops when I wouldn't hand it over. But here's the kicker. She got arrested, not me. By trying to frame me, Karen exposed her own incriminating secrets, ones that could land her behind bars. And if you're just as shocked hearing this as I was living through it, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and drop a quick comment letting me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your city or state, and your support helps keep these real-life stories coming. Now, let's dive right in. My name is Clarence Murray, and I'm a 60-year-old retired firefighter. After nearly 4 decades rushing into burning buildings, I thought I'd seen everything. Let me tell you, fighting a 5-alarm blaze almost seemed simpler than dealing with what happened in my own driveway not too long ago. I moved to this suburban neighborhood a couple of years back, hoping for a peaceful retirement. The place looked nice. Freshly cut lawns, mailboxes all the same height, neighbors who mostly stuck to themselves but flashed a polite smile now and then. Perfect for someone who wanted to read the newspaper on the porch and watch old westerns in the afternoon. Right away, I noticed how everything seemed so organized. There was a monthly HOA newsletter, a neat row of trash bins on collection day, and an overall hush that felt downright comfortable. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of our HOA president, a woman named Karen, but we never actually spoke at length. She'd just nod or wave if we crossed paths, rarely saying more than a curt "good morning." To be honest, I had no clue she had such a reputation. I'd heard the name Karen thrown around in jokes and memes, but I never imagined meeting someone who perfectly embodied all those negative stereotypes. At first, I assumed she was just another middle-aged neighbor who liked control. Little did I know that the lengths she was willing to go for that control would rock this quiet place to its core. A few weeks ago, I started noticing something odd. My internet had turned sluggish. Simple things like reading the news or streaming an old cowboy movie suddenly took forever. My first thought was that my phone or my computer was outdated. After all, I'm 60 and my tech knowledge is limited. But I tried all the usual fixes, rebooting the router, checking for software updates, even disconnecting a few devices. No improvement. One evening, fed up with buffering wheels and dropped calls, I decided to poke around my router settings. It took me a bit, but eventually I found the admin page. That's when I saw a device named Karen Phone. It wasn't mine. I changed the password and figured that'd be the end of it. Little did I know, I was just getting started. The next morning was sunny and warm, perfect for a cup of coffee on my porch. I was savoring the fresh air, watching the birds peck at my little feeder, when I saw Karen marching toward my property with a determined stride. She didn't bother with greetings. She came right up to my porch as if she owned it. "You changed your Wi-Fi password," she announced, arms crossed over her chest. Her eyes flicked from me to my front door, then back. I blinked. Good morning to you too. Yes, I did. Is there a problem?" She leaned in as if telling me a secret. "Yes, actually. My phone stopped connecting last night. I had an arrangement with the old owners of this place to use the internet. I'm the HOA president, and I keep track of community standards online." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You were using my network without asking?" Karen waved a dismissive hand. "You wouldn't understand. It's not a big deal. This entire neighborhood is under my watch, so it's only fair I have access to the local Wi-Fi signals. If anything, I'm doing you a favor by monitoring security." I set my coffee mug down with a soft clank. "Ma'am, with all due respect, it's my internet plan. I pay for it monthly. If you wanted to use it, you should have asked. But honestly, I don't want to share it, especially not after finding out you've been on it without telling me." Her cheeks flushed a deep red. "So that's how it is, huh?" She let out a snort of disgust. "I don't think you realize who you're messing with. The HOA can make life very hard for people who don't cooperate." I felt my blood pressure rise. "Ma'am, I've got nothing against you, but I'm allowed to keep my personal Wi-Fi private. That's just common sense." Karen squared her shoulders. "Then I hope you're ready for consequences." Before I could respond, she whipped out her phone. I expected her to fire off an angry text, but instead she dialed 911. My eyes went wide. Over a password? It felt surreal watching her speak to the emergency operator. She put on this shaky, terrified voice, describing me as some ominous figure in her neighborhood, hacking her devices and harassing her. She even said she felt threatened for her safety, which was absurd. I was just sitting on my porch, stunned that she had the gall to call the police over Wi-Fi. I tried to interject, "Karen, what are you doing? You can't just tell them I'm a threat. I haven't done anything." She shot me a triumphant glare and raised a finger to hush me. Then, still talking to the operator, she said, "Yes, I'm at 124 Maple. He's standing right here, staring at me with a hostile expression. Please hurry." Her act was so theatrical it could have won an award in a melodrama. She ended the call and stuffed her phone back into her pocket, looking satisfied. "They'll be here any minute. Good luck explaining your private Wi-Fi to the cops." I let out a slow, shaky breath. Part of me was terrified. At 60, a big man like me, I knew how these misunderstandings could escalate. Another part was just exasperated. I said quietly, "All right, Karen, if this is how you want to play it, I guess we'll see what the officers say." She folded her arms, stepping back as if I might attack her. "Don't come any closer, or I'll have you arrested for assault." I shook my head, refusing to move from my chair. This was insane. A neighbor I barely knew was about to turn my life upside down because she felt entitled to my internet. While waiting for the police, I went inside to gather any evidence I might need to prove I hadn't done anything wrong. Figured I'd pull up my router logs to show them that I'd simply changed the password. That's when something caught my eye, a record of browsing history from the device labeled Karen phone. I hadn't looked at that before, but curiosity got the better of me. Maybe she was just watching Netflix or scrolling social media. But as I scrolled through the logs, my stomach twisted. I found visits to extremist forums filled with hateful language targeting different groups. There were threads talking about bizarre conspiracy theories, calls for violence, and vile commentary I wouldn't repeat if you paid me. My heart pounded. This wasn't your everyday blog or news site. This was hardcore, hateful content. Then came something worse. Transactions on suspect websites dealing in stolen credit card numbers, fake IDs, and instructions for identity theft. It looked like she might have been buying or selling stolen data, though I wasn't sure. All I knew was that it was shady, big time. The final straw was a link to an even darker site rumored to involve horrific exploitation. I felt sick, a wave of disgust rolling through me. If Karen was frequenting those corners of the web, she was into some deeply illegal stuff. And she'd been using my network, probably to mask her trail. A heavy chill crept up my spine. She was calling the cops on me, hoping to paint me as some villain, yet the truth might be that she was the real criminal. My hands trembled as I saved all the evidence onto a USB flash drive. If the police were about to question me, I wanted to be armed with the facts that could blow Karen's entire life apart. Not 20 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights danced across my living room wall. I peeked out the window to see a squad car in my driveway. 2 officers stepped out. Officer Burnett, a tall black man in his 50s, and Officer Davis, a shorter white man who looked about mid-30s. Karen wasted no time rushing them, pointing in my direction. "There he is!" she cried, her voice laced with fake panic. "He's hacking into my private accounts, threatening me, maybe even planning something horrible for the neighborhood. I'm telling you, I don't feel safe." Burnett nodded calmly, then turned to me with a measured expression. "Sir, can you come outside and talk with us?" I raised both hands to show I was no threat. I'm not new to how law enforcement approaches situations with potential conflict. "Sure thing, officer," I said, my heart thumping. "My name's Clarence Murray, and I live here." Karen stood behind them, arms folded tight, wearing a smug grin as if she'd already won. The way she was acting, it was clear she expected them to automatically side with her. Officer Davis glanced between us. "We received a report that you might be hacking into Miss Karen's devices. She says she's the HOA president and that you've been messing with her access." I let out a slow breath. "I haven't hacked anything. I just changed my own Wi-Fi password because I noticed an unknown device connected to it." Karen jumped in. "He cut me off from the internet I've been using for months. That's theft or something like that. He had no right." Burnett eyed her skeptically. "Ma'am, if it's his private network, that's not exactly theft," she huffed. "He's stealing my data. I need to do official HOA tasks online. This is interfering with my duties." I felt my annoyance spike. Look, I have evidence on my computer showing that she's been on my network, likely involved in criminal activity. If you let me show you the router logs, I think it'll clear things up. Karen's face paled. Criminal! He's lying! He's a hacker, forging logs! Don't listen to him! Officer Davis and Officer Burnett exchanged a glance. Burnett said, All right, Mr. Murray, mind if we go inside and see these logs? That might help us figure out who's telling the truth. I nodded. Come on in. I've got nothing to hide. We stepped into my living room. Karen followed at a distance, looking like a cat ready to pounce. I guided the officers to my desk where my computer was already on, router logs displayed on screen. My USB drive lay on the keyboard containing all the screenshots I'd saved. Officers, this here is the device named Karen phone, I said, pointing at the logs. You can see the timestamps. She was connected at all hours. Here are the sites she visited. I swear I didn't go to these pages. They're beyond anything I'd want on my system. Officer Davis leaned in, scanning the list. He frowned, his eyes flicking from one line to the next. These sites, some of this is pretty ugly. Officer Burnett let out a low whistle, arching an eyebrow. Ma'am, he said to Karen, did you actually connect to this man's network? Because these logs suggest someone named Karen did. Karen folded her arms defensively. I told you, I used his Wi-Fi for legitimate reasons. He must have manipulated the data to look like I accessed some horrible stuff. He's framing me. I shook my head, trying to keep my voice calm. Ma'am, I'm retired. I'm no tech wizard. I just know how to check my admin panel. All of this was generated automatically. There's no reason to frame you. I didn't even know your name until this morning. She glared at me with pure hatred. What's your motive then? Are you trying to ruin me because I'm the HOA president? You want to take over the HOA? Or is it because I live here and you— She didn't finish that sentence, but the implication was clear. I forced myself to remain collected. Officer Burnett stepped between us. Miss Karen, we're going to look deeper into these logs. If they match your phone's MAC address or anything else, it'll confirm who accessed these sites. Karen's lip trembled. I'm telling you he's lying. Why won't you believe me? The vibe in my living room was thick with hostility. Karen paced near the door, phone clutched in her hand like a security blanket. I half expected her to dial 911 again, just for some weird advantage. Meanwhile, the officers examined the router logs more closely. Davis took photos of the screen with his phone, presumably to document everything. At one point, Officer Burnett asked gently, Ma'am, do you mind if we take a look at your phone? That might clear this up. Karen recoiled as if he'd asked her to hand over her child. Absolutely not! That's private property! You can't just barge in and search it. I rubbed my temples. But you're accusing me of hacking. Don't you want to prove your device is innocent? She huffed, ignoring me. Officers, he's trying to set me up. Look at him. He's probably got all sorts of high-tech gear hidden around here. Burnett opened his mouth to respond, but then we heard a sharp rap on the door. I cracked it open and saw another police cruiser had arrived, this time with a detective in plain clothes, a tall woman with a stern expression. She introduced herself as Detective Howard. Detective Howard walked in, nodded politely at me, then turned to Karen. I understand there's a dispute over Wi-Fi usage and accusations of hacking. She spoke in a measured tone, as if she'd handled a dozen calls like this already. Karen seized the moment. Yes, thank God you're here. This man has locked me out of the internet, tampered with my phone, and might be plotting bigger attacks. She put on her best damsel-in-distress face. Howard nodded slowly, then looked at Officer Burnett and Davis. What do we have so far? Burnett gestured to my computer. Mr. Murray has logs showing Miss Karen's device connected to his network. The browsing history includes what appears to be extremist content, possible fraud, and other suspicious sites. She denies it's hers. Howard's eyebrow shot up. Extremist content? Fraud? That's not typical for a neighborly dispute. She glanced at Karen. Ma'am, if those logs are authentic, this is serious business. Karen scoffed. You see how they twist everything? I am the HOA president. I keep track of neighborhood business online. He's forging logs to make me look like a criminal. He even admitted to hacking. I bristled. Excuse me? I never admitted any such thing. Detective Howard cleared her throat. Ms. Karen, do you have any evidence supporting your claim that Mr. Murray is forging logs? Because if not, we'll have to consider the logs themselves as primary evidence. Karen's face paled. He's a hacker. That's all the proof you need. Look at this setup. He's got a router, a computer, and obviously some advanced software." She pointed accusingly at my modest laptop, which was about 5 years old. Officer Davis couldn't hold back a slight snort. "Ma'am, that's a standard home PC. Nothing advanced here." Detective Howard took a step closer to Karen, arms folded. "Miss Karen, I'm requesting to see your phone. If you refuse, we may have probable cause to seize it anyway, given the alleged nature of these crimes." Karen's gaze darted around. I could see her panic growing. For a moment, I actually felt a twinge of pity. She was in over her head, but her pride and entitlement wouldn't let her back down. She opened her mouth, about to respond. Then all of a sudden, she lunged forward, reaching for my laptop on the desk. "Give me that!" she screamed, trying to slam it shut. "I won't let you set me up like this!" I yanked the laptop away just in time, nearly knocking over a lamp. Officer Burnett grabbed Karen's arm, pulling her back. She thrashed in his grip, face contorted with rage. "Let go of me!" Detective Howard stepped in, voice stern. "Calm down, Miss Karen. If you keep resisting, we'll have to detain you." Karen glared at me with venom. "You lying thief, you think you can ruin me? I run this entire neighborhood." Before anyone could react, Karen broke free from Burnett's grip momentarily. She rushed toward the door leading outside, but when she realized the rest of the officers were in her way, she turned on me, spitting words that still make me shudder. "You filthy," she snarled, using a slur I won't repeat. "You people shouldn't even be here. This is my HOA. I decide who belongs." The room went dead quiet. Officer Davis took a step back, visibly shocked. Burnett's jaw clenched, and Detective Howard let out a slow exhale. The temperature felt like it dropped 10 degrees. I stared at Karen, a mix of anger and sadness washing over me. I'd faced prejudice before, but hearing it so blatantly from a neighbor was jarring. The worst part was the sheer hatred in her eyes. She believed every word she spewed. Detective Howard spoke firmly. "That's enough. Miss Karen, you're out of line." Karen pointed at me with a shaking finger. "Don't you see? He's turning this neighborhood into a slum. He's hacking us. Burnett interrupted, voice tense. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for disorderly conduct and possibly more, depending on what we find on your device. Now put your hands where I can see them." As soon as Burnett tried to cuff her, Karen shrieked like a banshee, thrashing and kicking. Her commotion spilled onto my front porch. A few neighbors watched from the sidewalk, phones out, but none came to Karen's defense. I was left with an odd mix of relief and disbelief at how fast it all escalated. She swung her arms wildly, cursing me, the cops, and everyone else within earshot. "You'll regret this! I'll sue the whole department! I'll sue you, Clarence, for slander!" Officer Davis and Detective Howard managed to pin her arms behind her. She tried to stomp on Davis's foot, but he sidestepped. "Ma'am, resist again and you'll face additional charges for assault," he warned. Finally, with a swift click of the handcuffs, Karen was secured. She panted, her hair disheveled, eyes darting around like a trapped animal. The neighbors on the street stared, some filming, others whispering to each other. Detective Howard exchanged a glance with Officer Burnett, who nodded. "We'll need to confiscate her phone and check for evidence," Howard said quietly. "Given these router logs, we've got enough probable cause to suspect serious cyber offenses." Burnett looked at me, a flicker of sympathy in his eyes. "Mr. Murray, we may need you to provide a formal statement down at the station. Also, we'd like a copy of your screenshots. If it's all right, we'll keep your USB as evidence." I managed a shaky nod. "Of course, take whatever you need." Meanwhile, Karen remained defiant, her voice rising in desperation. "This isn't happening. I'm the one who called you. I'm the victim." She hammered the inside of the squad car door with her cuffed hands. Davis shut the door firmly, muffling her tirade. He turned to me and said softly, "We're sorry you had to go through this. We'll do a thorough investigation. If everything on those logs is real, she's in big trouble." I let out a long breath. I could still hear Karen's muffled shrieks through the car window. "I just wanted my own internet back," I muttered, half to myself. The officers drove off, lights flashing, with Karen locked in the back seat. She kept yelling something about lawyers and lawsuits, but it faded as they left my property. A few neighbors lingered, approaching me with questions. I explained as simply as I could that Karen had been using my Wi-Fi for questionable activities and then tried to turn the tables on me. A few days later, I learned Karen was formally charged with multiple offenses, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and pending cybercrime charges once the police examined her phone data. The HOA board swiftly removed her from the presidency, issuing a statement condemning her actions. Rumor had it the evidence on her phone was even darker than what I'd seen in the router logs. In the end, I finally got what I wanted: peace and a stable internet connection. It's unfortunate it took such a spectacle to get here, but sometimes justice has a funny way of showing up at your doorstep. Thanks for sticking with me right to the end of this wild and unexpected journey. If this story left you speechless, please like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let's all hope that every entitled Karen out there learns the hard way that justice can and will prevail.